Republicans are resorting to an old argument to fight a new battle, crying states' rights as they attack President Obama on gun control. Lawmakers in at least 6 states have introduced bills to make it illegal to enforce the president's new gun proposal. This kind of argument is being echoed by some local sheriffs, the very people we trust to uphold the law. Joining me now is Tennessee State Representative Joe Carr, who introduced a bill making it illegal to enforce any potential ban on assault weapons. He said, and I'm quoting, "It's our attempt to push back on the federal government's ever-increasing encroachment, not only on our personal liberties, but on our state sovereignty." Representative Carr, first of all, thank you for joining me tonight.
Well, Reverend Sharpton, I'm glad to be here.
Now, let me ask you, do you really think your state bill will trump federal law?
Well, that's part of the point, Reverend Sharpton. What we're trying to illustrate here is that the federal government has systematically over the years been on a full assault of the Second Amendment. And when you assault the Second Amendment, Reverend Sharpton, you just don't assault the Second Amendment, you assault the entire Bill of Rights. And that's the broader point that we're trying to draw here, is that for years, the Bill of Rights have been under attack from the federal government for no other reason than power and control. And we object to that, and we're drawing a line in the sand.
All right, now, let me ask you a question. Where in the Second Amendment does it give you the right to do the things that the president announced the other day with executive orders? Because the president said, I was there, that he supports the Second Amendment. He's not talking about guns. He was talking about magazines that shoot 100 rounds. He was talking about assault weapons. The Second Amendment doesn't give you that right.
The right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed, Reverend Sharpton, and you know that as well as I do, if not better than I do. So you're saying that's to the right to bear any arms they choose? What I'm saying is that the Second Amendment was crafted by our founding fathers, just like the other 9 amendments were, and it was in response to King George III and the tyranny that King George was trying to leverage against the colonists, which is why they declared their independence and why they wrote this Constitution. Our founding document is the Bill of Rights. And all those Bill of Rights, all 10 amendments, are predicated on the notion and found in the Declaration of Independence that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Where in there that says you can bear whatever arms you want? Why can't I have a hand grenade? Why can't I have rockets? I mean, if you're going to say arms and anyone can define what that means, then why can't I have whatever I want, a nuclear weapon under my bed?
Well, I think you're drawing an inaccurate conclusion to what we're saying. It would be the same as walking into a theater and yelling fire. The freedom of speech doesn't give you the authority to do that. So there
Isn't that tyranny?
No, it's not tyranny, and I think you know that.
So you mean that all of these rights are not unlimited rights?
No, nobody said they were unlimited. You said that. What we're saying, I know, and I'm trying to give you an explanation. We're trying to say here is that the Bill of Rights were constructed for the purposes of maintaining the civil liberties that our founding fathers thought were extremely important.
Right.
And everything is predicated on the notion of personal responsibility and the sovereignty of the states, which is why we have the 10th Amendment. So when any federal government assaults the Second Amendment or the First Amendment or the Third Amendment, it's an assault on all the amendments in the Bill of Rights. And what we're saying is that this government, his assault on the Second Amendment, is inappropriate and it's overreaching, and we think it's time for the states to push back. But if you agree,
State Representative Carr, that you have to have limitations, you regulate it, I guess the real question is, who regulates it, the federal government or the state government? And we've had that argument over segregation. We even had it over slavery. Who decides where the rights end? We're saying, basically, the state should have that right.
Well, you make a very important point, and I would concede that Martin Luther King even understood this, because he enacted the idea of civil disobedience to right a terrible wrong in this country in the 1950s and the 1960s. So I would ask you, Reverend Sharpton, do the states then have the same responsibility, right, and obligation to exercise some sort of civil disobedience when the federal government usurps the authority of the Congress and the states to divest them of their sovereignty.
I'm glad you asked that question, because what Martin Luther King did was he engaged in civil disobedience so the federal government would protect him from unjust state laws. You're not engaging in civil disobedience. You're saying in your bill, you should read it, that you want to have the right to arrest the federal government for enacting their own laws. Dr. King didn't arrest the state people. He was arrested by them appealing to the feds. You're doing the opposite. You're saying the feds are illegal and we want the right to arrest them. That is un-King-like.
Well, Reverend Sharpton, you're sounding a little bit like Piers Morgan now screaming at me, but let me back up and say...
Let me say it more silently. You are sounding more un-King-like. King did the reverse of what you did.
You're
and I've been called a lot of things. Piers Morgan's not one of them till tonight.
Well, it's a new day, as you said in your previous segment. But the point I'm trying to make is Martin Luther King understood clearly that the state government and the federal government had an ever-increasing authority in the roles of the individual lives.
Exactly,
and that was
which is why he protested.
And that was unnecessary. And what was unnecessary is because it wasn't found in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights. And what we're saying is the states have a sovereign role here. And the sovereign role is this, is that the President of the United States doesn't get to, by fiat of executive order, to empower himself with determining what the Second Amendment says. The states have a role.
Martin Luther King said that he was protesting in his famous speech of 50 years ago that concluded with "I have a dream," that he was protesting a governors whose lips were dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. So I'm glad you're using King as the model, because it is the antithesis to what you're saying. Let me show you what Governor Wallace said. Let me show you what Governor Wallace said.
The unwelcome, unwanted, unwarranted, and force-induced intrusion upon the campus of the University of Alabama today of the might of the central government offers frightful example of the oppression of the rights, privileges, and sovereignty of this state by officers of the federal government.
So the governor said the sovereignty of this state, very similar language to you, Mr. Carr, the same words.
And Reverend Sharpton, those were misapplications of what we're talking about. So you're drawing parallels that don't exist. I completely reject the notion. If you will let me explain, I'll tell you. We completely reject the notion of what Governor Wallace was saying at that time, and I take great offense of it. As a father of a biracial little boy, I reject the notion of what you're telling me.
No, what I'm telling you is that you're using sovereignty of the state, and Wallace used sovereignty of the state.
All you have to do is read the Bill of Rights, and you'll see in the 10th Amendment it talks about the sovereignty of the states, Reverend Sharpton. Moreover, and more importantly, we all know that Washington is broken, horribly broken. And here we have a president leveraging little children on stage for no other reason than gin up fear among those peoples in those states to say that we're going to come and take your Second Amendment away. And when you take the Second Amendment away, Reverend Sharpton, you take the first, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, and eighth, not amendments.
I think he said he was going to take your assault weapons and your magazines. That's exactly right. He said that the federal government does have the authority over states, and I think that the sovereignty of the states is something that many of us fought and we continue to fight. We can just agree to disagree. Thank you for coming on, Tennessee State Representative Joe Carr, and thank you for your time. We'll be right back.